Hello and welcome back to the fourth episode of the series that I've been doing on mold illness and chronic fatigue. In this episode, we're going to be talking about binders, antimicrobials, and also biofilm disruptors, which are the final considerations, so to speak, when it comes to addressing mold illness and chronic fatigue. Obviously, when I say final considerations, there are so many things that we may need to consider for individuals on a case-by-case basis. But these are the big rocks or the big chunks in the framework when we're looking at supporting someone with chronic fatigue and mold illness. Before we go into the content for this episode, I thought it would be helpful just to do a recap on what was discussed in previous episodes. All these episodes can be found on my website. They can be found on Spotify, iTunes, or your favorite player. So if you're just arriving at this episode now, and maybe you think you're ready for binders or you're ready for antimicrobials or whatever it might be, it might just be worth going back to listen to those previous episodes just to make sure you haven't missed anything as part of your journey to get you to this point. In the first episode, I talked about the importance of stability, and that is not a concept which is unique to chronic fatigue and mold illness. That is a concept that I talk about repeatedly when it comes to working with chronic illness and chronic fatigue generally. Very often we arrive at a place of chronic dis-ease because there has been so much unprocessed stress which has happened for a very long time. And this has created instability in the body for a purpose, and to the extent that the body has just been trying to find different ways to cope, different ways to keep on going. But that over time has then caused a great amount of sensitivity and instability in the system. And therefore, we really just want to help the body find a relative sense of safeness again. And how we do that is by supporting blood sugar, because blood sugar highs and lows throughout the day are not good for your nervous system. By supporting the nervous system, I obviously have my Nurturing Resilience subscription, which teaches somatic tools, but there's also brain retraining options and various other courses out there. We want to be pacing, we want to be sleeping, we want to be resting. And these are some of the cornerstones of building the foundations for fatigue recovery. So once we have those stabilizing factors, or we've built we have some stabilizing tools in place, shall I say, we want to practice mold avoidance. And this is what I talked about in the second part of the series, which is mold avoidance in the home, different tests you can do, maybe the importance of getting some contractors in, looking at remediation, or just things you can generally do to support a healthy living environment, or if you can't get out of mold. But we also talked about mold avoidance through diet and how your dietary choices can help to just lighten some of that mycotoxin burden. Then in the previous episode, we talked about getting things moving, getting your bowels moving, getting your lymph moving, getting you moving to support detoxification and drainage. We also talked about the importance of addressing digestive health from the top down. And very often the work that we're doing with clients is a lot of gut work alongside the mycotoxin work. The most common two tests that we order for our clients are the OAT, organic acids, and mycotoxin urine test, and comprehensive digestive stool analysis. Those would be the top two. We're often working with gut issues and mold issues simultaneously, hand in hand. We also want to give the kidneys support, give the liver support, and if necessary, give the gallbladder support as well. I realized I didn't actually talk in a lot of detail about gallbladder support in the previous episode, but there is a whole episode which is dedicated to the gallbladder that's linked there. And we also want to think about heat stress, cold stress, getting, not necessarily cold stress, but heat stress to get you sweating, getting things moving around the body. And again, I've got a whole episode where I talk about that. So feel free to listen to some of those additional episodes. They are linked in here. So now you've done all of those things. You've created stability. You're practicing mold avoidance. You've got your lymph moving, your bowels moving, your body moving. You've maybe got some sweating happening, and you're supporting your liver, your kidneys, your gallbladder, and your gut. Now you're ready for the next step, which is to add binders. And binders are what we call the garbage men of the gut. They help to take out the trash. So just a reminder, the process of detoxification looks like the blood is filtering toxins to the liver. The liver is processing those toxins in phase 1 and then phase 2 detoxification. And remembering that phase 2 detoxification is amino acid conjugation, which is why protein is so important. Those toxins are packaged up in bile and sent to the gallbladder. And then the gallbladder will, or should I say a healthy gallbladder, will eject bile into the digestive tract. And then the toxins bound to the bile should ideally be carried out of the gut in your feces. So binders help to attract the toxins. So sometimes especially if the gallbladder isn't as healthy as what we would like, the bile can be a little bit sticky. And then the binders, or the toxins stay bound to the bile. And there is a possibility that the toxins can be reabsorbed and re-enter circulation, which means that all that beautiful good work done by the liver has now been undone because the toxins are being reabsorbed. So by taking binders, we bind the toxin and then they are carried out of the gut more successfully through our bowel movements, which is why we want to be having regular and healthy bowel movements before we start taking binders. So that is the reason why we take binders. But it's important to note that people can be really sensitive to binders. For example, in my own journey, I just picked up some activated charcoal. I started taking high doses straight away, felt really great for doing it, no issues whatsoever. But then I could have a client who will just take one capsule. I was taking 6, and they've got nausea, they've got diarrhea, they've got fatigue, they've got body pain, and they feel absolutely awful. So it's really important to understand that different people have different levels of sensitivity, and therefore we need to start really slowly. Hopefully by the time you've got to this stage, you already have an idea of like how sensitive you generally are to things and how cautiously you need to go. But it is always best to start slowly because you can get an increase in symptoms when you start taking binders. And a little bit of disruption might be okay if it's just like, like an increase in like 20% and it lasts a day or so and then it settles down. That might be absolutely fine. But the risk we run if we push through is we're re-stimulating the mast cells and they can get reactivated, and then it can take a long time to calm all of that down again. So we never push through when it comes to binders and antimicrobials. And sometimes this is a little bit of a dance with clients because there is a certain amount of disruption which is required. But if it gets too much and if it gets too hard, then we need to stop. And sometimes it's not always easy to be able to tell when to continue and when to stop. But when in doubt, it would probably be better to stop. If that's the case and you need to stop taking something, then you would ideally stop for 2 weeks, allow everything to settle down, and then you could start again with binders at a lower dose. So what exactly are these binders that I'm talking about? Well, common binders include things like activated charcoal, bentonite clay, chlorella, N-acetylcysteine, Saccharomyces boulardii, zeolite clay, even probiotics like L. rhamnosus, aloe vera, and fulvic and humic acid are all possible binders. And what might be worth noting is that certain mycotoxins may bind better to some binders versus others. And so this is when testing can be really helpful, because if you know which specific mycotoxins that you have in your urine, you can then select binders accordingly. And if you're retesting your mycotoxin levels further down the line, you might stop taking some binders and start taking other ones as levels change depending on what you're doing. And so here, it might be worth noting that if you are going through this process, and it is a very important part of your journey, retesting will also need to be part of your journey. And it's recommended to retest every 6 months or so. And what we might see with retesting is that levels go down. Some mycotoxins may completely clear from the panel. And then in some cases, levels can go up. And levels going up doesn't always mean a bad thing. Yes, sometimes it can be attributed to re-exposure of certain toxins, but in some cases, it can also be a sign of what your body wasn't able to clear before. It's clearing better now, especially for those people who really struggle to detoxify. So this is where it can be helpful to be working with a practitioner that can help you navigate all of this. But if we're retesting every 6 months and we see, okay, levels of this have gone down, but levels of this have gone up, then you can adjust your binders to potentially reflect those which might be more effective to the levels that have gone up. So there's probably going to be this question. You're listening to this, you're thinking about taking some binders, and you're like, well, how much should I take? And really, the answer, there's no clear answer, because there will be some people, as I said, I could just take 6 activated charcoal from day one, whereas I've got a client who might not even be able to take 1 activated charcoal from day one. But we need to just pick an amount, and even if you don't necessarily take it daily, so if you know you're quite sensitive, you might take 1 capsule of activated charcoal, and then you may wait a day, 2 days, and then 3 days later you take another one. And if that's okay, then you could do 1 every other day, then 1 daily, and, potentially build up. Even just 1 a day could be enough. But if that was too much for you, you may need to take a little break, and you may even need to open the capsule and just sprinkle a little bit of the contents in some water. And that might be all that you tolerate. And so I think this is sometimes where people can throw the baby out with the bathwater. They might say, oh, I didn't tolerate that, so I'll just stop completely. Or there's no point if I can only just take a tiny, tiny little sprinkle. But it's really important to understand that, when we are so sensitive, small things can make a big difference. So even just pacing and going low and going slow, and just understanding that this is a long journey and it's going to have to continue for a long period of time, all these little small things will potentially add up over time. Generally speaking, especially if you're sensitive, the best tolerated binders are going to be activated charcoal, bentonite clay. I use activated charcoal just generally the most often with clients, mostly because a lot of the mycotoxins that are generally showing up in people's tests are activated charcoal is effective for those. So you could always, go with that if you're sort of guessing and you're working through this on your own, although this is not medical advice. And ideally, we would take binders for as long as it takes to get a clear urine test, and then 3 months afterwards. So this is where retesting can be helpful to see that the test is completely clear. Here I will be completely transparent. I've heard different practitioners talk about this. Some practitioners are insistent that the urine mycotoxin test should be completely clear. I have a lot of clients who feel better and then they just don't test. And so this is where I discuss this on a case-by-case basis with a client. I'm like, do you feel good? Do you feel like you need to keep on working on this? Yes or no? But it does just depend on how sick the person is, what progress they feel they're making, how content they are with where they are in their recovery. There are lots of different factors involved. So once you can tolerate binders and you feel stable on binders, the next step is going to be to add in antimicrobial herbs. So antimicrobial herbs are used to kill off colonized mold. This might be mold that is colonized in the gut, mold that is colonized in the sinuses, mold that is maybe even colonized on the skin, or even in some cases, the vaginal canal. So we're using certain herbs which can be effective to kill off spores that are now living in the body and continuing to produce mycotoxins. And this is going to be necessary. We can't just be clearing the toxins from the body all the time. We need to get to the source of the toxins. And if your home is safe, if you're eating well, but you've still got these spores in your body that are producing toxins, then you will continue to be toxic. So how might you know that you need to take antimicrobials? Well, if you've tested, if you've done the oats and urine mycotoxin test, You may have positive colonization markers in that test. You may have ongoing nasal, ear, and sinus congestion that's not clearing with things like binders, with a low histamine diet, or any mast cell support. That could be a sign that you have some ongoing colonization. So we can use, for the sinuses, we can use nasal sprays. Most gentle would be something like a nanoparticle silver spray. Sometimes I get clients to do steam inhalation with essential oils. So basically you boil some water, or almost boil some water so it's not too hot. Put it in a bowl, put a few drops of essential oils in the bowl, and then you can even do like a towel over your head, or sometimes that's a bit too powerful for some people. I might just need to waft some of the essential oils into the sinuses. There's a more gentle way of supporting the nasal colonization. I even sometimes will put these essential oils in the bath. So when you're sitting in the bath, maybe with your Epsom salts, you're also just inhaling some through the sinuses. You can use diffusers in your home, like I spoke about previously. And in some cases, I might even recommend like an Olbas oil nasal spray, which has some of the antimicrobial herbs in the spray. Depending on the person, you might need to start really slow, just one squirt in one nostril one day, one squirt in the other nostril the other day, even a few days apart, and build up slowly. Some people might be able to go in a lot more aggressively. Like, as I explained, I've been able to be quite aggressive with myself, but I have got clients who are completely on the other end of the spectrum. Then we can also take antimicrobial supplements for the gut. So things like holy basil, ginger, olive leaf, garlic, berberine, thyme, oregano can all be beneficial. Again, if you're not sensitive, you could go in, often with clients, I might say take some oregano, like a capsule, like 3 times a day. But in some cases, people might just need to have teas or tinctures and just start really, really low, 1 drop at a time. And so this is where we need to, if we suspect that we're sensitive, we need to start with a teeny tiny amount, gauge for any reactions, leave it a few days, go in again, teeny tiny amount, gauge for reactions, and then just gradually build up over time. And then if there are any vaginal issues, ongoing yeast issues, thrush, that type of thing, you can also get suppositories for the vagina that you're using at this time. And a particular brand is the Vitanica Yeast Arrest brand, which is a homeopathic suppository that you insert into the vagina. And you can do that once or twice a day over a number of weeks. So again, with these antimicrobials, we're doing them alongside the binders, and we're continuing to take them until we have that clear mycotoxin panel, or we feel really confident that symptoms have improved and aren't returning. This is, where I discuss with the client, like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Should we try come off this? Should we see if there's a relapse? Should we do some more testing? So these are things that we decide on a case-by-case basis. And then the final piece here might be to do some biofilm disruption. And I touched on this briefly in the first episode of the series, but basically biofilm is a matrix of proteins, lipids, polysaccharides, and DNA that acts as a protective coating or a protective barrier against the mold. And basically, if the mold is hidden or protected in the biofilm, the antimicrobials are not getting to the mold, and your own immune system isn't getting to the mold. So then once we've, cleared a certain amount of toxic load through the binders, and we've cleared a certain amount of colonization with antimicrobials, we might just do now, this is like the next level. The body has a bit more resilience. We can perhaps disturb, disrupt, open up these biofilms. That's potentially going to cause a bit of a symptom flare, because we're potentially exposing more of these things to the immune system, so sensitive people can react. So we're still doing the binders, we're still doing the antimicrobials, but then we could add in things like trypsin, nattokinase, serratiopeptidase, things like ginger could also be a biofilm disruptor, monolaurin, honey, ginger, garlic, olive oil, cranberry in terms of foods. So there are actually some of these biofilm disruptors also overlap with antimicrobials. So if you are particularly sensitive, you might want to start with the antimicrobials that are not also biofilm disruptors to prevent taking on too much at once. And this is where, again, it can be helpful to work with a practitioner who can help to work all of this out for you. So this kind of brings us to the end of talking about what we do if somebody has mold. And just as we wrap up everything here, it's just to say that this process takes time. Obviously, the more sensitive you are, the more slow that you may need to go. And just to really give the message again that patience is really important as part of this. I think a big mistake that a lot of people make is they go into aggressively and they make themselves feel worse, and then they throw the baby out with the bathwater. So don't underestimate the importance of taking care of your nervous system at this time, the importance of laying those solid foundations by addressing stability, about getting all those drainage and detoxification pathways working well, and then easing in really, really slowly with binders first. Once binders are tolerated, antimicrobials, and then once you've done several months of antimicrobials, think about if you want to do some biofilm disruption as well. Then, as I said, you could retest. The goal is really to have a clear panel and then do the supplements for 3 more months, wean yourself off. I'll be completely transparent in clinical practice. When clients feel well, they're just like, see ya, goodbye. They don't necessarily want to do retesting and just like continue with some of these things. So if you feel good, but you don't want to retest, then it might just be a case of weaning off of supplements, see how you feel. But you might want to continue with some of the mold avoidance strategies, obviously supporting detox and drainage, maybe some low dose binders, maybe intermittent dosages of antimicrobials, kind of just have some sort of detox maintenance support that is an ongoing thing for you so that you can maintain your health long term. And sometimes re-exposures happen. Sometimes everything is going well and we travel and we stay somewhere and there's mold, and we might need to, in the short term, go back to what we've done before. But as I say to all my clients, it's like once you've done this once, you know what works for you. You know what your body responds to. And you don't have to pay a practitioner hundreds of pounds to work it all out for you again. You can just go back to what you know, or check in with a practitioner for a short call just to make sure that what you're doing is all okay and there's no other contraindications. And then you can get back on track again. But your health and your resilience will grow and will expand over time. And therefore that might mean that you can have exposures and just get a little bit knocked, but not go completely backwards. And obviously there are some times when we also do everything right and they still feel, and there's still symptoms despite things actually being completely clear. And then in which case you might need to work with someone who can help us get to the bottom of if there's anything else going on. Are there potentially other things like heavy metals, Lyme, other co-infections that need to be dealt with? Or do we need to work with more on emotional trauma or more on physical issues or mechanical issues in the body or issues with the vagus nerve that could be contributing to symptoms as well? Now, I wish I could just wrap everything up in a wonderful, neat and tidy package for you, but unfortunately bodies do not work that way and we kind of have to be constantly evolving. But I hope you have found this series useful in terms of understanding what you can do to support yourself if mold is an issue. And I look forward to sharing more with you in the next episode.